Inside Hilltopper Athletics is brought to you by Panhandle Cleaning and Restoration. Here's your host, Lynn Ullum.
Welcome, Hilltopper Nation. Inside Hilltopper Athletics, joined by co-host Dawn Clegg. Dawn, just getting your thoughts. We've made it home from an exhausting 5 days in Indiana University of Pennsylvania. Give me your thoughts, your experience.
Well, it was exhausting, you're right, but it was exhilarating. That was one of the most impressive performances I've seen from a West Liberty team in many years, and I think I've seen all of them since we started that great run back in the early 2000s. But I think we're at 6 straight double-digit wins in the postseason, if I remember correctly, and we've shot 50% or better in all of them. You can't ask for much more.
Yeah, it was just an incredible experience, and when I say exhausting, and I always say I'm 180 years old, I was exhausted when I got back, but probably because it was so exhilarating, as you said. So
Exactly.
That extreme high zapped me, and it took me a couple days to get back to full strength, but I've got my legs under me, and I'm geared up to make the trip to Evansville, Indiana. I joined a team out there 2 years ago, and it's a great venue. It's a huge arena. It's kind of like IUP on steroids.
There you go.
And the hotel is right beside the venue, which makes it so convenient for not only me and you and whoever else is there administratively, but for our team. You're not getting in a bus and
Right.
traveling all over the place. So let's revisit just the experience out there. And of course, we did a podcast the day of that game of IUP, and we were going over our keys to victory. And the one thing that we both agreed with at the end of that podcast is West Liberty is way better on defense than people believe. So let's talk about the defense.
Well, and we predicted it, and then they went out and proved it. I mean, the one stat that jumped out at me was, IUP, number 3 team in the nation, playing on their home floor, playing for a trip to the Elite Eight, and the West Liberty team that quote unquote doesn't play any defense held them without a field goal for the last 8 minutes of that game.
Last 8 minutes of the game and 53 total.
53 total points, yes.
For the game. So, and that doesn't surprise me. And we were fooling around, and of course I'm a numbers nerd, and I'm running points per possession and things like that. And our numbers are a little bit skewed, that when we're dialed in some of these big games, our defense improves immeasurably. I mean, it is off the chart how well it improves in the bigger games.
Oh, there's no question about it. And you look at the scores, and you can't always go by scores, because one of the things that misleads people about our stats is the number of possessions in a typical game. Now, one thing that happened with the IUP game is the possessions were lower. So the IUP folks are saying, well, yeah, but we held West Liberty to 70 points. Well, okay, great, you did, but you lost by 17. And one of the things that Coach Hallett talks about, at this point, it's just, and at any point, he likes winning. Winning is hard. You only have to win by 1. It's not like we've talked about this, if West Liberty's up 10 points, it feels like you're down 15 because we blow people out. At this point in the game, everybody's good. We're going to have the same thing out in Evansville. We keep playing like we've been playing. I'll take our chances.
Right, and I'll take our chances. I think we are peaking at absolutely the right time, but it's on both sides of the ball. So just talking to our coaching staff before we started this podcast, the 3 games out in Indiana were 3 of the most efficient games offensively we've played all year. And the numbers on defense speak for themselves. You get into a championship game, you're playing a team that was either ranked 1st or 2nd in the nation, and you hold them to 53 points. And I do want to expand a little bit on what you were just talking about. Because the MEC is a high-scoring league, it's an up and down league with a lot of possessions. The scores are naturally going to be higher. But it is an amazing in these leagues that are more slower paced. No one ever says when the good team wins 60 to 50, they stink on offense. But if you win 190, everyone's pointing fingers and go, you're bad on defense. I just don't understand that concept.
Well, no, but I think it comes from again, this is just my opinion, from what we see on TV. I spent a lot of time yesterday watching the first day of March Madness at the D1 level. And honest to goodness, there is so much emphasis on defense, slow pace. You don't see anybody that plays like a West Liberty or a Nova Southeastern. You don't see that up-tempo basketball that you and I kind of grew up with. And frankly, a lot of those games were dull, boring. They weren't fun to watch.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Aesthetically, not only do we win games, it's pretty darn fun to watch the way that we play. And talking to Connor Harr, assistant on the men's staff there, he told me points per possession, we're up to second in the country, which shows efficiency. It's an efficient offense. But what I love about this team, and it's what Coach Hallett and I talked about on the podcast yesterday, is the unselfishness leads to efficiency.
Yes.
And it's not just in high possession volume games where you're running up and down the court. This team, when the pace slows, which sometimes it does, the deeper runs that you make, our efficiency rate is not only as good, you could argue it's higher in the slower pace game than the up and down games that we're accustomed to playing.
Oh, yeah, I would think so. And we saw one of the byproducts of our defense stepping up like it did at IUP and all for the whole weekend, excuse me, that tends to lead to those kind of games. If you have a team that's already has a tendency to be a little bit more slow-paced like IUP, they were struggling to get the ball into court. They were struggling to get into their offense. A lot of times they weren't really able to get into their offensive set until there were just 10 or 12 seconds left on the shot clock. So that's naturally going to cut down on the number of possessions, but it's absolutely going to cut down on the number of quality possessions for that team.
Correct. And we know that our team, we love the live ball turnover because that leads to instant offense. But you can be really, really good in your press, and it's not going to show up in your typical press efficiency numbers, which are turnovers.
Yes.
There's teams, like in that IUP game, they may not have turned it over 30 times. But when we are making them use shot clocks and they're taking contested shots at the end of shot clocks, it's not quite as good as a turnover, but it's pretty darn close.
Right. And, you talk about as you progress in these tournaments, shot selection becomes even more important. And the more important that becomes, and we've both seen it, when you get under pressure, when you get a little bit more fatigued, physically, mentally, or whatever, shot selection seems to suffer. And bad shot selections, low shooting percentage, advantage defense.
Yes. And so now, as we're wrapping this week up today, today's date is on a Friday here. The team is leaving Sunday. 7 o'clock in the morning. I think they're going to try to practice at some point on the way there. There's a banquet Sunday night, which is just kind of a general welcome banquet for all the teams there. And then we'll be getting locked in again, getting ready for that 2 o'clock or the Tuesday tip-off.
Yes.
So
one last thing I want to bring up about the IUP trip, and especially that last night, the championship game. The fan support that West Liberty had at that arena. And first thing I did when I got back to the hotel room Saturday night was watch the broadcast all over again. And now they had the IUP student broadcasting crew, and I'll give them credit. They were pretty impartial, and they were talking about the fan support that said this almost sounds like a West Liberty home game. And Coach Hallett and the players, they said the same thing. And one picture that's always going to stick with me from that game. And I'm sitting directly across from the Hilltopper bench at the end of the game, the waning seconds. Coach Hallett is getting the starters out to receive the applause, and he turns around and he sees that sea of black and gold in the stands, standing and cheering, and just raises his hands. And I mean, that was, you get chills from that.
Right, and we talk, and obviously the winning is the most incredible part of this. It's the icing on the cake or whatever you want to call it, but this is why we have sports. There's a lot of reasons why you have athletics at the college level. This is an important part of that, because it's not just me and you, and it's not just the coaching staff, and it's not Rex Lancaster and his crew, it's not just the players. This is a community, this is a school thing that they all get to revel in this, that it's part of the experience, and you're just hoping when you have athletics that you get to the point where you get to experience nights like that.
Exactly. Yeah, and that was just a wonderful experience, like you said, exhausting, exhilarating.
Yeah, it was. So anyway, this is going to wrap up today's edition. We're going to keep feeding you these podcasts to kind of feed the hungry monster out there. But I do want to say, and I knew I was going to make this mistake on the podcast yesterday, we made a mistake of starting talking about individuals. Yeah. And I even said a couple of times, I know I'm going to forget somebody or whatever. I didn't have scripted notes. I don't think we talked about Alec West and his contributions. I call him the Swiss Army knife, a guy that does a little bit of everything. I don't think we even mentioned Zach Rousseau, and look at the tournament that he had.
Right, maybe the biggest shot of that game.
Right, and even mentioning those two, I know we're going to leave somebody else out. They all play a part of this.
Yes.
And the last thing that I want to mention, I went to practice yesterday, so I'm down here watching. Of course, they're doing defensive drills. And it is every single guy on that roster digging in. They're being coached the same. Everyone's playing hard. And we talked a lot in the podcast yesterday. This is a team experience. This is a team accomplishment. And again, I hate to individualize these podcasts. This is all about West Liberty basketball. So keep joining us. We'll keep feeding you podcast. See you out there on Tuesday.
Go Toppers.
The Panhandle Difference.
Westbanco appreciates our more than 15-year relationship with Panhandle Cleaning and Restoration. They're a one-stop shop that handles all of our work, whether it's quick projects or whether it's a project that might involve multiple locations, multiple branch locations. We appreciate the relationship. Doesn't matter what we throw at them or how complex it is. They get it done quickly and they do a great job.